Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Erin Corcoran, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and just give the Kroc Institute's land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the Kroc Institute's presence on traditional homelands of the Native people, including the Haudenosaunee, the Miami, the Peoria, and particularly the Bohegan Potawatomi, who have been using this land for thousands of years and continue to do so. We recognize our own place in the story and practices of colonialism and understand our responsibilities extend beyond this gesture of land acknowledgement. We must also reflect on the University of Notre Dame's past, present, and future relationship with the original stewards of this land and actively pursue ways to amend this troubled relationship. We also know that a land acknowledgement alone could be meaningless if it is not accompanied by active work to address the structural injustice and violence perpetrated against Indigenous people around the globe, both historically and currently. The Kroc Institute is committed to working to address these harms, to find ways to contribute to constructive transformation through our teaching, research, and peace-building efforts. And we hope that today this panel will honor the traditions of these Native peoples as we recognize people who are here, who are studying and doing research on the intersection of development, democracy, and peace building. So first, I just want to take a moment to thank Ari Woodward, who has sort of helped put this event together, and Fabrice, our student worker, who has made sure you guys are well fed and taken care of. And I'm really excited. One of the really great things about being at the University of Notre Dame is that there are people that are working on issues that I care about across campus. And this has been an opportunity for me to kind of be able to kind of connect with people who I've actually never worked with or connected with before, and putting this panel together. So I'm really excited about who we've got here today. And so the structure is I'm going to introduce the panelists, just give a little bit of information about each of them. And each of them are going to speak for about 5, 7, 10 minutes around there. And I'll finish up the panel discussion, and then we'd love to spend a lot of time for you all to ask questions of our panelists. I know there's students, researchers, community members, faculty, staff here that are clearly interested in this issue, and so we're just really glad to have you here in this space today. So the first panelist we're going to have is Professor Karen Richman, and she's a cultural anthropologist by training. She teaches courses in Latino study, Romance, languages, and literature, and anthropology. She is an author of the book Migration and Voodoo, as well as numerous articles and book chapters on Haitian and Mexican migration, religious, savings, work, language, and music. Her scholarship and teaching have been recognized with awards for OpenCourseWare Excellence, the Heisner Award for Best Journal Article in Ethnohistory, and the Newberry Library and Social Science Research Council Fellowships. She also co-edited a special journal volume on Haitian religion in 2012 and was the hosting chair of the annual Haitian Studies Association conference here at the University of Notre Dame. And her current research project is on interdisciplinary study of Mexican immigrants' social wealth, savings, and retirement by the National Endowment for Financial Education. So thank you for being here today. The second panelist we have to her right is Jean-Marc Rousseau, who's a staff attorney at the Notre Dame Law School's Global Human Rights Clinic. He also received his LLM from the law school in 2007 and 8. Before joining the law school, he was the Haiti program director, founded by the University of Notre Dame through the College of Science. And in that capacity, he played a leadership role in the university's engagement in collaborative efforts to mitigate the incidence of lymphemic filariasis in Haiti. In addition to his work with the Haiti program, Rousseau founded a school to provide free education for the less fortunate in his hometown of Livelihood in 2017. He's also a Rotarian, having held the position of Assistant Director Governor from 2016 to 2019. Rousseau has also been recognized several times for his selfless service to his fellow Haitians, including his leadership in responding to the humanitarian crisis that enveloped Haiti, and specifically after the major earthquake in 2010. He was awarded a Notre Dame Presidential Award in recognition of his distinguished contributions. And as I mentioned before, he received his LLM from the Law School at Notre Dame in 2008. He is married to Marie Michelle Rousseau Nestor, and they have 2 children, Jean-Marc Sebastian and Marc Michel Sterling Rousseau. So we're very lucky to have you. And you might have seen him recently on the local news as well, trying to sort of provide some insight to our community here. And then finally, we have TJ D'Agostino, who is a professor, assistant professor of practice at the Clio School of Global Affairs, situated in the Pulte Institute for Global Development. And he's also a fellow at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. He teaches some of his courses on comparative and international education policy. And related, that's what his research focuses on, as well as the examinations of systems and institutions and their role in improving educational outcomes for vulnerable children in low and middle income contexts. His scholarship and policy and practice engagement focus on the role and contributions of faith-based institutions and how they fit within comparative policy contexts in school and system improvement, with an emphasis on language, literacy, inclusion, and at-risk youth. His research has examined the role of faith-based educational institutions in both Africa and Latin America, and has explored how these institutional contexts shape and influences institutional character and contributions to faith-based education. The other major strand of his research and policy engagement is in the area of systems improvement and educational policy in low-income settings, with a focus on vulnerable children, foundational skills and development, and systems improvement. And his recent work in this area focuses on language and education policy and its intersection with foundational literacy, implementation research, exploring how to improve the consistent impact of policy interventions to improve student outcomes at scale. So we have a really, I think, people coming from a lot of different disciplines. Myself, I'm trained as a lawyer. I worked on refugee and asylum policy. I had many clients when I was practicing in New York City and Washington, D.C. from Haiti. I did several human rights delegations down to South Florida during the 2000s, looking at Haitian detention policy in Haiti. So I'm going to be speaking more about the migration and U.S. policy response to this crisis. But we're really glad to have you all here. And I also want to give a shout out to Cloud Institute for Civil and Human Rights, who's a co-sponsor for this event. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you want me to put up your first slide?
Sure. Thank you so much for organizing this flash panel, and it's a great delight to be here with my esteemed colleagues whom I've known for a very long time, and we've known each other. We met in Leogan about 20 or more years ago, and I have been working in Haiti for 4 decades, and my other home, I literally have a home in Leogan, Haiti, which you are a native of. And I speak based on my long-term involvement with this community as a scholar and an honorary member of the community, and as well as an advocate for Haitians generally in the world, and especially those trying to get asylum in the United States. I've been helping people come as you have, and I'm hoping that those I'm helping right now can make it in. I'm so glad too that students in my class are here. I teach a 4-part sequence on Haiti that incorporates learning the language of Haiti, which is called Creole. My purpose today is just to talk about and help bust 4 myths that are very prevalent about Haitians and Haiti. And time permitting, I'm going to talk about each one. And they are, first, that Haiti is an exception. It can't be understood in any context because it's weird, it's strange, it's unique. The second myth is that Haiti's the poorest country in the world. And that's a trope that gets mentioned all the time by outsiders, and that Haitians can't stand because it seems inevitable that someone's going to say that. So the first myth that Haiti is weird or odd can't be understood in any context. The second one, that Haiti's the poorest country in the world. The third myth is that Haiti's a sovereign nation state, that it's a sovereign nation state. And the fourth myth is that Haitians mainly live in Port-au-Prince, right? And also that Port-au-Prince is Haiti, or Haiti is Port-au-Prince. So for the first myth, the idea that Haiti is somehow the exception or the quintessential other. But instead, we need to put Haiti in a context that we're more familiar with, that is a context of colonialism, imperialism, globalization, and neoliberalism. Haiti's in the orbit of the US empire, and it's geopolitically very strategic. Haiti gained its independence early. It was the second independent nation state in this hemisphere in 1804, and it offered refuge to many anti-colonial leaders. But unfortunately, it suffered the fate of many former colonies in the region that became independent much later, as much as 150 years after Haiti. And it's a pattern that's been repeated in many countries, and unfortunately in Haiti as well. That is, this pattern is there's a dictatorship that's supported by a powerful international community, especially led by the United States. And the question is, what happens at the delicate time when after years of strife and suffering, people mobilize for change? What happens in this delicate moment? And what do those who've benefited from the authoritarian regime do to stop and avert the crisis? And why is it a crisis? It's a crisis because what transnational capital prefers is a benign authoritarian government that will provide an attractive context for capital that's left the core in search of profits in a race to the bottom. When the inevitable result seems to be insecurity, violence, and mass exodus. And especially in the last quarter of the 20th century, think of Haiti, but also many countries in Central America, Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, etc. In the case of Haiti, this particular crisis begins in 1986, when the people finally brought down the 25-year-long Duvalier dictatorship. They organized a new, totally democratic constitution, but the U.S. stepped in, rescued Duvalier with the U.S. with the Haitian Treasury, which he took with him to his mansion in the Pyrenees. And this population that was hungry for change, for democracy, that organized political parties, wrote a very democratic constitution. Their efforts were undermined. And the former military officers and soldiers, by the way, who were Haiti was never at war with any other country, stepped in, killing people at the polls, kidnapping the first democratically elected president after only 8 months serving in office. And they weren't necessarily wearing uniforms anymore, but they were still doing the work for others, powerful others. And that leads me to the second myth, the trope about Haiti being the poorest country in the world. Well, actually, Haiti is home to some of the richest and most powerful people in the hemisphere, if not the world. And these are the powerful others I'm talking about, who had a stake in making sure that the mobilization of change in the early 80s didn't reach fruition. And these very rich business leaders have powerful political and economic alliances abroad, especially in the US, Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. These ties also reflect their relatively recent arrivals in Haiti compared to the colonizers from the French colony of Saint-Domingue, or the people who were stolen from West and Central Africa and brought to work as slaves in the colonial French plantations in the 18th century. The members of this transnational oligarchy are not just Haitian citizens, but they also have citizenship in other countries. They have US passports and passports in other countries as well. The US could freeze their accounts, revoke their passports, sever business ties with them, but does not do so. Why? These oligarchs control the trade to Haiti, the import and export trade. They even have their own port. Imagine a person or a corporation in the US with its own international port that cannot be examined by any state authority. These oligarchs process the arrival of weapons produced in the United States through this port or through the Dominican border. These imports are well known to the US and the so-called international community. So why don't they stop them? Whose role in the crisis? The role of these oligarchs in the crisis is invisible because of their immense power, wealth, and transnational investments and alliances. Instead, the news media focuses on something else. Instead of this essential structural role, it highlights what for them is the most accessible and visible effect through the image of someone who conforms to our image of a bad guy, a dark-skinned Black man with a gun, a low-level gang leader who takes or used to take orders from his employers. We cannot ignore the entrenched cultural representations of the representations of the white as human and the black as non-human other, which of course authorized chattel slavery in the colonies in the Americas. The total rejection of the one population that challenged the system in revolting and creating their own totally free republic, right? That is Haiti. And then think about the reconstruction after the Civil War, Jim Crow, and as Michelle Alexander called it, the new Jim Crow in the form of the criminalization of Black males and mass incarceration here. And so now one of the leaders of these armed groups named Jimmy Cherizier, also known as AKA Barbecue, and some of the other lieutenants of the real power have started to flex their own muscles. They realize that instead of doing the job for their employers, they might start to take some matters into their own guns or their own hands. And to some powerful influencers, that's the real crisis. And it's represented as a gang problem, as if the gang control the whole countries and are wreaking havoc, while the actual orchestrators remain invisible and silent in the background. Ordinary Haitians, from the well-educated to those who don't have the resources or connections to go to school, understand this. They understand this in terms of their revolutionary history and the ways their great feat in between 1791 and 1804 has been consistently undermined by foreign interventions and violations of their sovereignty in partnership with these anti-democratic oligarchs. Haitians can solve their own problems. They know that all of the parties have to come to the table. There's ample evidence everywhere you look, inside and outside the country, including to the 20% of the population that live in diaspora. A member of whom is sitting next to me, and several members of whom are in this audience, or they're the children of them. They are 20% of the Haitian population. They have the capacity and the skill to restore their republic. They are scholars, engineers, lawyers, doctors, building, teaching, and healing abroad. They didn't want to leave their beloved homeland and move to societies that would not welcome them because their competence, leading back to 1791, challenges the tropes of white supremacy. Haiti has a democratic constitution that bars a president from becoming a dictator, and a parliamentary system that was established after the people brought down the Duvalier dictatorship. A dictatorship that was happily sponsored by the US. With this established political tool, that is the Constitution, and their own great devotion and capacity, they can restore their home. All of the sectors of Haiti, rural and urban, have to come to the table. The political, financial, and economic allies of the oligarchs have to change their strategies and stop arming and supporting those who do not want Haitians to ever again control their lives. How am I for time? About 3 more minutes? Okay. A couple more points. The third myth is that Haiti is a sovereign nation state. Well, Haiti was the second sovereign nation state in this hemisphere, established January 1, 1804. But its sovereignty has been continually undermined, especially by the United States. Most notoriously in 1915, when the US started a military occupation of Haiti, who wasn't at war with anyone, let alone the United States. But one could argue that after the 20-year-long occupation, the US has never left, and that Haiti is a de facto colony of the United States. Therefore, when Haiti elected a president in 1990, who won 67% of the vote in a 12-party election, and the US wasn't pleased with this, they tried to persuade him to step down the night before the election. He refused. And then 8 months into his presidency, the US sponsored a coup against him. It wasn't US soldiers who literally removed Jean-Bertrand Aristide from the White House, but he actually got elected again. This powerful democratic constitution of Haiti does not allow a president to succeed himself. It makes the president relatively weak, so he wouldn't become a dictator again. But he was reelected about 10 years later, and he was, again, displeasing the United States. And so in 2004, some US soldiers went in and literally removed him from the presidential palace and brought him and dropped him in the middle of Africa, as though that would somehow silence him and Haitians' thirst for democracy. So Haiti's sovereignty has been violated over and over again, especially, but not only by the United States. Those are just some of the most egregious examples. And finally, the fourth myth I want to bust is that Haitians are primarily in Port-au-Prince. The reporters station themselves in Port-au-Prince, and when they venture out of Port-au-Prince and they go somewhere else, they divert the conversation back to Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince represents about a fifth of Haiti's population, and about the same number of people live outside Haiti. That could be shown on the second slide. But Haitians are in the United States, they're in Chile, they're in Brazil, they're in Canada, they're in France, they're in Guadeloupe, they're in Martinique, they're in Turkey and elsewhere. So when we talk about what's going on in Haiti, we can't privilege Port-au-Prince, and we have to include the diaspora, who are very involved in Haiti still. The Haitian diaspora is the number one source of, comparatively, Haitians are more devoted as a diaspora to their homeland than any other population in the world. According to Manuel Orozco, Haiti ranks number one per capita in the amount of remittances that go back to Haiti, the billions of dollars that Haitians, who tend not to be earning huge salaries abroad, send back. And then also, Haiti is not Port-au-Prince. Most of Haitians don't live in Port-au-Prince. And although people outside of Haiti, in Léogâne, for example, are very affected by what's going on in Port-au-Prince, the fact that these armed people control the one road that leads to the west and south of Haiti, life goes on in Léogâne. People are still working, they're still producing, they're still educating their children in that school that you established and that my adopted son established also in Léogâne for free. That life goes on. The airport is open again in Cap Haïtien, and people are solving their own problems. The community Tirivia that I'm connected in Léogâne to is celebrating its 5th anniversary of a wonderful partnership that has provided solar power, that has provided electricity, that has rebuilt roads and bridges, that has restored the colonial era pool to provide recreation for the children. And they are running their own lives with increased difficulty, but we can't pretend that the whole country is undergoing, immeasurable chaos. And I'll just stop there. Thank you so much. Mark?
Yes, after listening to Karen speaking, I don't have anything else to say.
We always have a
Well,
interesting debate here.
yeah, but I want to take you a little further to history, where just for you to understand how it all started, and then why we are here. Why do we get to where we are now? Haiti has not always been the way it is now, the way that it is portrayed in the news. We've made exceptional contributions to the history of mankind.
Yes.
And the US and Haiti are the oldest countries in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti has been freed from slavery since 1804, after defeating the Napoleonic army. And since then, we are paying the price of our freedom. We are the first nation to abolish slavery and the slave trade. We've helped many countries in their plight for freedom, including the United States of America. People go, oh, surprise, yes, it is true. But unfortunately, most Haitians do not promote the country well to the outside world. You have to understand that slavery was an engine for economic growth for many countries. So the very existence of Haiti as a free and independent Black country was not tolerated. In response, Haiti has to be destabilized through isolation. After our independence, no country wanted to do business with us. We were isolated. And in fact, in 1825, France had imposed an indemnity on Haiti just to recognize us as an independent country. We fought for our freedom, but because of the isolation, we had to pay, and we spent 122 years paying this so-called indemnity. It wasn't until 1862 that the US would recognize Haiti's independence after we fought in Savannah, Georgia, alongside the US Army. Since then, we have seen no less than 3 major foreign military interventions in Haiti, like Karen just said, with more interference in the country's policy, politics, and economy. Each intervention comes with its upside, but also its downside. Upside, because it helps resolve the immediate crisis. But the downside is none of them have helped resolve the root of the problem. Now, if we want to talk about the current situation in Haiti, one must say that it did not happen overnight. The decline of Haiti is due to many factors, both internal, but also external forces. Political instability, the weakening of government institutions, natural disasters, the lack of real engagement on the part of the international community, all of it had contributed to the Haiti's decline. Now, let's talk a bit about the external forces. We often hear and talk about neoliberalism policies, but never once we ask ourselves how and at what cost a country will have to face this, to implement this. While it is important for a country to have international or external investment in the country, but it is also vitally important to develop and help safeguard what we have at our disposal and not to completely destroy it. As an example, up to the mid-1980s, Haiti was producing substantial amount of rice to feed its population. And in the 1990s, all of a sudden, we developed reliance on rice importation rather than domestic rice production. Tell me this is not something that is orchestrated. The decline in rice production in other communities like coffee, cacao, cocoa, and so on was caused by poor policies supported by the US. It had devastating consequences for Haiti's rural population who were forced to leave to go to the capital in search of a better life. Since everything is concentrated in Port-au-Prince, the best schools, the most investments, most of the country's infrastructure, people are leaving the rural areas to go to Port-au-Prince. But again, find themselves exposed to abject poverty all over again. Most of them dwell in the slums of Port-au-Prince, and those areas, they have little or no government interventions. They still lack all basic services. They live under extreme and harsh conditions and very vulnerable to violence that we are now seeing. So this is a way to say that before the occurrence of this crisis, people have already been exposed and deprived of their basic human rights. Now, if we talk about the reign of impunity and its relation with the violence, the ongoing man-made security crisis paralyzing the nation is fueled by the predatory political and economic corruption. For decades, gangs have been used and weaponized by senior politicians, bureaucrats, and business elites to suppress dissent, to steal elections, and protect businesses. The latest scandal being the mismanagement of the Petro-Caribbean Fund, Since 2008, government officials have largely benefited from these funds and have created gangs group to protect them and their investment and their assets. As a result, they don't want to launch a real disarmament campaign, even though they know who is providing the weapons and the ammunition. Instead, they prefer to close their eye on the gang's criminal activities and sometimes label them as community leaders. Additionally, there's not a concerted effort on the part of the US to stop the shipping of guns and ammunition to Haiti. We don't produce guns in Haiti. We don't produce ammunition in Haiti. Furthermore, the national police and the Haitian army, what's left of it, are forbidden to purchase ammunition and weapons from the US or elsewhere. It's only yesterday, today's what, 28th? Yesterday, the 27th.
Yeah, 28.
The 27th, the Biden administration had allowed the Homeland Security to provide $10 million worth of ammunition to the national police. Since 1990, that has not happened. Because of the weakening of the national police, the gangs feel at ease to operate without fear and to even increase their activities, from kidnapping to drug trafficking and money laundering. Furthermore, they have created their own independent channels to get weapons and ammunition. They become uncontrollable by their bosses who were providing weapons to them. Now, if you want to talk about the relationship between the gang violence and the exodus, the mass exodus that we are seeing now, the increasing gang activity that we are witnessing in Port-au-Prince and some other cities is hindering access to basic relief, blocking fuel supplies, and profoundly disturbing services at various institutions, from hospitals and clinics, from schools and markets. As a result of that, a large number of people have been forced to flee the country to seek refuge in countries across Latin America, with the ultimate goal to reach the US. Though they have faced daunting challenges getting to those roads where their human rights have been violated, but some prefer to face uncertainty in the roads instead of being exposed to kidnapping and rape. Families in Haiti have sold everything they have to send their loved ones away. They prefer to sell what they have now instead of being asked to sell them by the gangs for kidnapping ransom, without even knowing whether the family member will get released after having been raped multiple times. 99.99% of Haitians who fled Haiti are those who have been either victims of gang violence or who are exposed of violence occurring in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, I would say. They are not what the social media is saying about them. Haitians are hardworking and resilient people. All we are asking is to be given an opportunity to succeed in life. But what can be done? Haiti needs its friends now, not tomorrow. Because of the crisis, some 4.7 million people are threatened by acute hunger, including 2.5 million children. About 500,000 children are out of school, with a large number of them sleeping on the streets with their parents, again, exposed to further violence and rape. Cholera is spreading across most of the country's departments. If we don't act now, natural disasters coupled with instability, insecurity, will only compound the population's miseries. The US and the so-called Friends of Haiti have to address the security crisis that they partly created by supporting corrupt leaders to get access to power. If not attended to, the crisis will only deepen, leading to further upheaval at home and beyond, with grim implications for regional stability. We have to have clear mandate of the security missions that will come to Haiti. We cannot repeat the same mistake where international forces would come to only work superficially and not addressing the root of the problem. Stopping the import of guns and ammunition should be the MMS priority while tackling the gangs, both big and small fishes. Simultaneously, address the major humanitarian crisis left by the gangs with particular focus on women, children, and the elderly. Implement social projects starting in the provinces, focusing on schools, hospitals, university, housing, agriculture to provide food and water provision that will help to keep people from returning back to Port-au-Prince. Invest in infrastructure projects outside of Port-au-Prince in order to create jobs. Provide support to the justice system to ensure that it is independently doing its job. Continue to impose sanctions that consist of asset seizing, travel bans on former and current government and economic elites. Stricter control on guns and ammunition leaving the US. For the US to stop the mass deportation of legalize the Haitian immigrants who are already present on US soil so that they could continue to participate in the country's development. And lastly, I would like to leave you with these words. The world should stop seeing Haitian as they are seeing what's happening in Port-au-Prince. The egregious scenes that you are seeing on TV don't describe Haiti, nor the Haitian people. Our past was triumphant. Nothing should stop us from becoming triumphant again in the future. One thing I know though, we'll rise up. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks. So the themes that Karen's remark have introduced have already been really rich and helpful, and my remarks will just kind of build on and maybe add some color to this. The kind of orienting theme of, I think, what I'd like to share, I'll tell you a little bit about my connection to Haiti in a moment, but is related to this headline that I keep reading in lots of newspaper articles that say, what has created the situation in Haiti? How did we get here? What is leading to this? And disappointingly or discouragingly, my read of all of those articles is pretty inaccurate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But Haiti's a complex place with a complex history, and it's taken me a long time to feel like I have a handle on some of what's happening. But I think we heard really helpful background from our previous two panelists. And I also think that it's worth underscoring that the depictions of Haiti and Haitians in the media and historically are often extremely unfortunate and racist and despicable. And some of the language that I've seen come up most recently is pretty shocking of some of how Haiti is being depicted. So I think the remarks that you're hearing of Haiti is a beautiful island. It's in the Caribbean. And with a beautiful people with a proud and amazing history. So in terms of my own background, briefly, I first went to Haiti in 2006, about a year and a half after graduating from the University of Notre Dame. And so I've been connected to Haiti for about a little less than 20 years. And I worked there pretty intensively in education projects while initially on staff at Notre Dame, and then after joining the faculty between 2010 and 2020. After the earthquake, we got involved in a partnership with the Congregation of Holy Cross, involved in helping to rebuild one of their schools that collapsed in the earthquake in an outskirts neighborhood of Port-au-Prince called Carpou. Basil Moreau School was the name of the primary and secondary school. And then became involved in a project with the Catholic Church in Haiti and Catholic Relief Services on improving educational outcomes, especially in literacy and in teacher training. So the lens that I bring to this discussion is as someone who worked in Haiti for 10 years on education projects and who first set foot in the country in 2006, met Jean-Marc then, hosted by the Notre Dame Haiti program, and have seen kind of the evolution of things since then, and have been, I feel like, had a healthy understanding that I didn't understand Haiti at the beginning, and have been trying to understand it since, and feel like I do to some degree a lot better now, and have been reflecting a lot on these circumstances. So what explains what is happening now? And I think you heard a lot about this, especially in Jean-Marc's remarks, both and in Karen's remarks, especially in kind of the deep, what I would call like the deep antecedents or root causes that extend back to like the fragility that Haiti, the economic fragility and governance fragility that Haiti has been in for its recent history, that extend back to a lot of the longer term history. But most people, when they start counting what's happening in Haiti now and explaining the circumstances, point back to the assassination of the president Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. I don't think this is the right place and time to be starting to count what's happening in Haiti. For me, this would more accurately, the kind of cascade into the really scary things that have been happening in Haiti started in about 2018, 2019. And it's when it's around the last time I was able to visit Haiti, because factions within the country related to political elites helped shut down the country. It was this thing called Pays Bloc, which is like country shutdown essentially. And it became really hard to travel. It became really hard for schools to operate. We weren't able to run our summer programs that we were doing with kids for kind of remedial programming. The CRS warehouse in Port-au-Prince that was housing and storing a lot of the children's books, the literacy books, textbooks that we were going to distribute the following fall, was ransacked, and we lost about $100,000 of material at that time. This, and understanding what was happening at this time, I believe, is kind of when things started to really get bad. And it's the same forces that we're seeing today. COVID kind of interrupted it, and then it picked back up again. After COVID, ultimately, a flashpoint was the assassination of the president, but these things were happening again. So, but a quick thought or two about what led to this kind of country shutdown and the forces that are at play. I recently, at the Kellogg anniversary, heard a talk from a colleague here at Kellogg that I think his work explains this really well. Guillermo Trejo, who's got a recent book from 2020 about called Votes, Drugs, and Violence. And the thesis, if I can paraphrase what I understand of it, is that repressive authoritarian governments that mobilize state violence in the form of police, army, or like secret security services to repress people. What happens after the transition away from those governments or back to democracy creates a major problem, because all of the people trained by the state to do bad things and to exercise violence on the community, those people don't go away. They stay in the country, and often they bleed into crime networks, and in particular, drug crime and gang violence. And it fuels and it professionalizes those industries and makes it much more complicated to deal with. I think that's the story of what happens here. So the roots of this go back to the Duvalier years and what was at the time under the first Duvalier dictator, Papadak, called the Tonton Macoute, which is Creole for Uncle Boogeyman. And it's like a network of kind of citizens who had been armed to spy on other people and repress, opposition. Led to a lot of disappearances and state violence. But then there were two part of the coup d'etats that Karen talked about that overthrew Jean-Bertrand Aristide and other democratically elected officials were military juntas. And these military juntas violently oppressed the community. They had death squads that killed, among others, Catholic priests and other people allied to kind of the opposition. The actors involved in those activities throughout this period are the people who have then often come into political power, are connected to drug cartels, and have begun mobilizing and arming gangs of poor, underemployed men often in slum neighborhoods. The reason I know this is from kind of direct and personal experience. After the earthquake in Haiti, I bumped into, I was at a World Bank thing, and I met this roving ambassador to the UN for Haiti. And I happened to mention this person's name back to the provincial of the Congregation of Holy Cross in Haiti. And his response, I mean, I didn't know this guy or anything about him. I just said, "Oh, do you know this person?" And he raised his eyebrows and he said, "Oh, he has blood on his hands." This person was someone involved in these kind of forces back under the previous regimes, but then rose to power under the post-earthquake president. Other folks that I've come across, I'll just share one other anecdote, and I won't mention any names, but I think the person, I had a chance through a colleague, a foundation partner of mine, mentioned that a leader from the Haitian Senate was near where I happened to be at that moment. He said, "You might want to meet this person. I think he's going to be the next president of Haiti." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I was about to go do it, but instead quickly Googled the person's name before I did. I didn't know anything about him. And I'm really glad I did, because he had a long, like, WikiLeaks rap sheet that says, among other things, he's probably the most corrupt political official in Haiti, and was involved in some of the really repressive and violent activities as a younger person in kind of the military apparatus, and since then kind of risen to power, deeply connected to drug cartels. And I think was the person primarily responsible to this initial country Haiti lock, the initial country shutdown. Was a major, was angling for the presidency, and was probably the person who was perhaps most aggressive in bringing gangs to bear on trying to affect political outcomes. This was a really common thing that was happening in Haiti going back to the 90s. But I think under the tactics of this political leader, they started to get more and more aggressive and more national in scope, shutting down whole parts of society. That was happening as of 2018. Then you fast forward, they kill the president in 2021. And I think, as Karen and Jean-Marc said, these elements, I'll give one other anecdote. Someone who's very connected to Cité Soleil, where most of the gangs, one of the slums where a lot of the gangs reside, has had occasion to interact with gangs often, talked about how most gangs are connected to some person in political power. And the minute you arrest some gang members, put them in jail, the next day they're out because the senator who's connected to them came in and intervened and gets them out. This is the kind of an entanglement that tends to happen, and it also entangles the elite and business elite. What seems to have happened is, as the escalation of the use of gangs and the equipping gangs with more and more sophisticated weapons, it has, I think, as Karen mentioned, it has gotten out of the ability of these elites or political leaders or former kind of military apparatus folks to control. And that is, I think, what we're seeing today. So kind of an escalation of the use of these tactics that has now become so widespread that, at least in Port-au-Prince, which is, though certainly not the whole country, and it is having a profound effect on people, obviously within the Port-au-Prince area, but a large economic effect on people throughout the whole country. And it's pretty devastating, because until things can be secure, it's really hard to have development and get kind of back to the good work of good people trying to live their lives and grow their country.
Great, thank you. So I will be brief so we can have some time for Q&A. And thank you so much for this background, because I think it's actually really important to sort of understanding how particularly people in America think about Haitians in the context of refugee policy. And
the treatment of Haitian asylum seekers by the United States government has been troublesome for decades. And oftentimes, it's contrasted with the US treatment of Cuban asylum seekers who also come from an island in the Caribbean off the coast of Florida. And so some of these things that, Karen sort of already missed that she's trying to deconstruct have actually been used in ways that have actually made it harder for Haitian asylum seekers to avail themselves of international protection, particularly in the context of US asylum law and policy, in part because they're characterized as economic migrants. That trope of being from the poorest country, of not being educated, of that they just want a better life is why they're coming to the shores of Florida historically. Where Cuba has been has higher economic input, even though they also have been strained by decades of US trade embargo, isolation, and economic mismanagement. And the US occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934. But yet, while waves of Cubans are coming into the United States in the latter part of the 20th century, most of them are greeted with open arms, where Haitians were not. And so just to, some of the ways in which I just wanted to kind of briefly highlight some of the ways in which US refugee and asylum policy has been exacted on Haitian refugees, both in the context of historically Cuban migrants, but also more recently Ukrainians. And so, in 1994, there was a coup in Haiti, as already talked about. And at the same time, there was a tremendous amount of economic turmoil in Cuba, primarily due to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And you had hundreds or thousands of Cubans and Haitians leaving their home country. And at that time, President Clinton decided to open up Guantanamo Bay to house these migrants who were fleeing, mostly by boat, and process them for refugee status. And then during that time, the majority of the 30,000 Cubans that were brought to Guantanamo Bay for refugee processing were ultimately allowed to come into the United States and were resettled as refugees. In contrast, over 20,000 Haitians that were in Guantanamo were repatriated back to Haiti after the US invaded Haiti and exerted its power. And so why is this important from a perspective of international refugee and asylum law is that it's the refugee definition. So the refugee definition coming out of World War II is a very narrow definition of who is deserving of protection. And so it really does matter if someone is fleeing what is characterized as economic persecution versus political persecution or religious persecution, or persecution based on their ethnicity or nationality. Because if they're a political refugee or a refugee that meets the refugee definition, the principle of non-refoulement is triggered. And this is a principle under international human rights law that guarantees that no one should be returned to a country where they would face torture, cruel, or inhumane or degrading treatment or irreparable harm. And it's supposed to apply to migrants at all times, irrespective of what their migration status is when they're migrating. But if they're seen as economic migrants, it's more sort of seen as voluntary, and this principle of non-refoulement is not necessarily triggered in law. I'm not going to go into the international agreements, but I just think it's important to sort of think about that if you're a state that's a signatory to this convention, you have an international legal obligation not to expel or return a refugee in any manner whatsoever to the frontiers or territories where his or her life or freedom would be threatened. And here's the key: on account of one of 5 reasons: race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So economic migrants are not protected, nor are migrants that are fleeing generalized violence or generalized civil war unrest. It's got to be sort of individually targeted. And so as a response, like generally speaking, Haitians as a group have not been able to avail themselves of sort of that kind of protection that other groups of people have. And so I'm going to sort of fast forward to today, starting in 2021, where we saw images of US deployed border agents riding on horseback, which is reminiscent really of the US's very disturbing history of racial and ethnic violence, which was perpetrated by Border Patrol and slave patrols and vigilantes, sort of in the South during slavery. against Haitian migrants. This is 2021 on the US southern border of the Rio Grande River, who were attempting to enter across into Texas. And at the time, again, this is on the heels of COVID, the US government also was invoking something called Title 42, which was a provision that basically allowed the US in some ways to back away, or they thought could back away from their legal obligations of non-refoulement by arguing we have a public health crisis, we can't screen people, we can't bring them in, we've got to hold them back and keep them in Mexico, hold them at bay. However, that authority was used pretty arbitrarily. And so just to give you a sense, during that time period, using Title 42, the US expelled over 22,000 Haitian individuals, including many women and babies who were seeking international protection. Contrast that at the same time, where the US processed 98.9% of 23,000 Ukrainians who arrived at the US border, nearly all of who were granted parole and allowed to enter the US and claim asylum in the United States. Same time period, right? So again, sort of seeing the racialized way in which our asylum policy has been used against Haitians. And just, you know, again, people have already sort of talked about the various different things that have happened historically in Haiti, but in the 2010 earthquake, over 220,000 individuals were killed and over 1.5 million people lost their homes. And there was increased political violence and the collapse of the government, and people were fleeing for a variety of different reasons, including natural disaster, but also political violence as well. And the US government did grant something called temporary protected status. People might have heard of it. It's a humanitarian form of relief that allows people the right to remain in the United States and apply for work authorization. It's different from asylum and refugee status because they can't bring their family. And it doesn't result in them getting any permanent status in the United States. It just kind of allows them this right to remain and work. And the other thing about it is that you can only avail yourself of that protection if you're in the United States at the time that the US government grants that status. So if you're in Haiti and that status is granted, you are categorically excluded from being able to avail yourself of that status. So while it has been, I think, a helpful humanitarian measure, it doesn't deal with people who are outside or on their way to coming. And it's also a very sort of, I think for a lot, it's kind of a precarious status because it requires the government to continue to renew that status every 18 months or every 12 months. I think in addition to the United States, the regional response has also been troublesome with respect to Haitian asylum seekers. And if you want to compare that to sort of Venezuelan asylum seekers and refugees in the region. And so, you know, another example is the Dominican Republic. So for those of you, you know, the Dominican Republic is a nation state that's on the same island as Haiti. And so there's a land border. And in between 2022 and November of 2022 and August of 2023, Dominican Republic is engaged in large-scale deportations, 120,000 removals, including women who were pregnant and breastfeeding, as well as 6,500 unaccompanied children that were sent back to Haiti. So again, US policy is also sort of trickling down and sort of to other smaller nation states about it's okay to push these people back. And then most recently, President Biden has announced that they plan to use Guantanamo Bay again to house a Haitian asylum seeker. And it's really troubling for so many reasons. Not just that I think detention is inherently inhumane and raises issues of per se violations of international human rights law for asylum seekers. But it was used in the 1990s as a makeshift camp to house Haitian refugees who were detained and treated horribly. And hundreds of Haitians with HIV were detained there indefinitely. And then even more recently, after 9/11, this site has been associated with war crimes and torture and massive violations of international conventions of human rights. It's a place that the US government has deliberately, I would argue, used that sort of they see as outside of their jurisdiction or territory as a way to evade their international obligations of human rights and humanitarian law, as a place sort of warehousing them offshore so that they can say that they're not doing that. I mean, I was gonna I have a couple of sort of recommendations, I think, going forward with respect to Haitian migrants, and then we can open it up for questions and answers. But I mean, one thing that I think that's really important, that's sort of changing, and we're seeing this even in the context of like climate change, is that where refugee policy used to historically be much of sort of a sovereign deciding who they were gonna let in or not let in, I think what we're seeing now is there's really a need for much more coordinated regional responses that are looking at how sort of countries can collectively burden share. And so that the country that's most adjacent to the crisis isn't the one that's bearing the greatest burden. And then related to that is sort of seeing protection as a continuum, right? So refugee protection under international human law sort of accords certain rights that come and obligations that come by states, but there's a whole host of other humanitarian measures that states can provide to those who are seeking safe haven, that are humanitarian in nature, and are very sort of feasible, I think, to do. You know, and one example of that is the use of advanced parole, bringing people in without actually determining what kind of status they have, but kind of making sure they can get here and then sorting out their status. Europe did that with the Ukrainians when they were receiving millions in the region. And I absolutely think that the use of Guantanamo Bay just needs to cease to end. So with that, I will stop. But I do want to, I know we've got lots of people here, and we have a tradition here at the Kroc Institute when we do these panels, when we have students, that we take at least the very first 3 questions from students before we open up questions to the larger audience. Karen, I don't know how you feel about that, but great. Okay, so who has questions?
I have a few questions, but it's like they kind of all go into one another because it's like depending on your answer. Okay. So like, okay, my first question was like, what can be done to ensure that like foreign interference is like not negative? Like, and I mean this like what you were just saying about Guatemala and all that. It's just like, how can we ensure that, okay, we want help from the United States, but like we don't want the help to be like it has been in the past. So how can we ensure that for the future? So that was the first question. And then the second question was like, so I was trying to like, I was thinking about it in regards to like the migrants and how I know that it's just like Haitian migrants, but migrants in specific, like when they migrate to other places, they help develop the places that they migrated to. And so I just wanted to know like, how can we get Haitian migrants to come back to Haiti? But then you talked about how they left for those specific reasons. And I was like, okay, now let's think about this again. And so then my next question is like, how, like, well, would Haitian migrants be able to play the part of the American interveners that we like want because of the power like necessary to, you know, develop Haiti, but we don't want because of the negative consequences that it can entail? And so then when I was thinking about all of that, you mentioned the gangs and everything. And then so then I wanted to know, like, can the gangs be utilized for positive reasons? I mean this because like, from what I'm hearing, there is power in it. Like the power is there, it's just being used in a way to undevelop the country. And so it's just like, can the gangs be utilized and given a purpose to say like, oh, if you're already like, if you're already making sure that nobody is getting to this part and nobody's getting on this road, can't we like give them a purpose and say like, hey, here's some money, go like guard the market? And it's like, give them a purpose because the purpose that they are being given isn't helpful to anybody. And it's just like, I feel like the gangs are like, they're a small part of the greater thing. So it's like, how can I say that? The corruption in the politics, that trickled down and created gangs, right? But it's just like, now the gangs are like, oh, well, forget about them. I'm going to do my own thing because I have this power and I have control and I can. It's just like, why not like say, okay, you have this power and you have this control and like make something useful out of it. Okay, that was the last.
Who wants to start?
We want to take more or just? Oh.
Yeah, let's take maybe a couple more and then we can open it up. Other questions from students?
Well, my question was related to one of her questions. I want to know, because you talked a lot about the gangs and the fact that they don't go away exactly. So how would you integrate them into a new government, but preventing the emergence of a military dictatorship considering they probably want to keep the power that they have today, even if they were to create a new form of government.
One more question? Anyone else besides any questions? Okay, we'll start with,
RJ has,
okay, yes, RJ, what's your question?
I want you to know, like, maybe how, in terms of the US, like, I guess, intervention and kind of that investment into, Haitian development, and how much is, our Haitian officials, or where is the collective from the representative of Haitians to, like, putting forward that development? And if that's changed because of, past hindrances to, Haitian communities, or that, some of this is persisting and just a constant battle against, like a certain group of people who are, implicating that way from, higher power.
okay, thank you, Maria, for a, typical multilateral, complex question. And it's a pleasure to have you always in class, okay, as well as Ahmed and Jay, all of whom are in the second semester of my class that combines anthropology of Haiti with, learning Creole. I think you also supplied the answers, and one of my anthropology colleagues has said, let's not call them gangs, because there's such a, and as I was saying in my piece, that there's such symbolism attached to that in American consciousness, which is white supremacist, and that classifies Black men as the other whom we should fear, etc. So we can call them people who've been armed and they're employees. And, the ethnography of this type of group shows that, people are searching for dignity, they're searching for respect, right? Ways to provide for their families, right? To be somebody. And they'd probably rather have an outlet that was positive. This is an alternative that they turn to because there aren't any others. And Jean-Marc has talked about how Port-au-Prince swelled with migrants. Haiti was a lush tropical environment, an agricultural economy and fishing also, that was pretty self-sufficient in food. But the undermining of the economy over a century and a half, it didn't start yesterday, but the US, one of the goals of the US occupation was to centralize everything and actually undermine local production to make Haiti, as poor as it was, because there's still money to make, an importer of US food. So it was actually a strategy of the US occupation, and the Millspaw actually, the administrator, said that he specifically wanted to increase rice imports. We're talking about back 1915, 1934. So Port-au-Prince is full of unemployed, underemployed people who are, very, as you said, very vulnerable to being preyed on, but also for their own security, right? And for, a route to respect can join these groups. So I think that they would like to have a better alternative. Yes, and Haitians can and must lead the process. All sectors have to come to the table. The rural sector, most of Haiti, has been excluded from most of the political process. They weren't even well represented in the parliament. They have to be, and running the show. So foreign partners can be partners supporting a Haitian-led answer. And too many skilled people left. Leogan is depopulated, actually. Everybody I know whom I watched grow up, because I've been there for 45 years, they've left, okay? And they are professionals here, or their children are professionals here. But they want to go back home. They want to have a reason to go back home and contribute, right? All of their knowledge and capacity. I know you long to go back. Haiti has lost something because of all the education they put into you to go to the state university and get a law degree, which the state sponsors, by the way. And then you had to leave, not because you wanted to. There's plenty of capacity. And those who have the power now have to be persuaded that they too, it's in their interest right? To have Haitian-led solutions that they can somehow, they have to be persuaded that they can somehow benefit from that.
Other comments, gentlemen?
Well, I wish it were so easy to answer. From a Haitian perspective, I would say that back in the 90s, when the military coup happened, and with all the negotiation that was going on at Governor's Island, etc., the only thing that they were asking the military is amnesty. They've killed thousands, right? They've killed thousands, and then they still want amnesty. What happened? The US granted them amnesty. None of them were persecuted. So what happened next? There's a group that is still grudging, and then you gave them amnesty, but there was no truth commission really. I mean, there was that truth commission that did a job, yes, but what happened next? I'm entitled to know what happened to my family. I mean, Felix Lamy, who was a very well-known journalist, he disappeared in 1991. Never heard of him afterwards. Antoine is married, many of them. Okay, so so many of them disappeared. They died. They were killed. So what about the family? So what answer do we have for the family of those people that are still mourning the death of their people? Joseph Dorville, he got killed by gang.
He was your number 2
Yeah.
person, and he has a master's from Notre Dame.
MBA.
He came here, he came to my Haiti class. He was murdered by a gang in 2004 in Port-au-Prince. The gangs were, I'm using a word I said I wasn't sure. And so in other words, the problem was already huge, right?
It's not
Under
the fault of,
Duvalier,
it's not the fault of the young people in the gang. 80 to 90% of them, this priest that I works most with these guys, 89% of those guys do not want to be in the gang.
Of
And if
course,
you gave them a job, they would leave tomorrow.
yes,
A couple of them have become like quite hardened and are deep in.
they want, if you interviewed any of them now, what do you want your child to be when they grow up? Your son. They wouldn't say, I want him to be in a gang. They'd say, I want him to be a professional.
So to go back to the question, what do you do with them, with the gangs? You have to make a differentiation of the big shot, like I said, and the small fish. Okay, same thing that happened in Rwanda. They didn't prosecute everyone who was killing people, right? Like Karen just said, like TJ said, they are those guys that they grew up with them, and they have no other opportunity than to get some money and then hold a gun, etc. Those people, I can understand that they can be put back to community service. They can be, there can be a reinsertion, social reinsertion program for them. But there are people that, were using those gangs to protect their power, their businesses, etc., etc. Those cannot go without, they cannot go unpunished. Those gang leaders like Barbecue, who is very smart, by the way,
And a former police officer.
and he was a former police officer, he is destroying practically half of Port-au-Prince. These guys cannot go unpunished, So before we say that, before we talk about amnesty, we need to know the truth, and then we need to target those that have, the leadership role and the chaos that is going on now, and then prosecute them. Otherwise, we'll go back to the same thing all over again. So yeah.
I think your question is also really good. I do think like the root causes of this are authoritarian state power, and the US is, as Karen, I think, said rightly, is implicated in our support, and as we have in many parts of the world, of sanctioning actors that created the roots of the situation. But now you have pretty nefarious characters with deep history of violence and who are mobilizing actors and using this to control the situation. And I read a fascinating article just before coming here about the role of like talked to Jean-Marc right before this too, and he was like, kept using the word spaghetti. It's so complicated and everybody's kind of interacting that you have like the political leader that I was mentioning mobilizing gangs from one region. This is back in 2021. They were talking about one of the elite families paying off barbecue to not take over their like area of factories. And then barbecue threatened to then ransack the factories anyways, and they couldn't pay it the amount of money that he was asking for. So that member of the elite allied with the politician who controlled the gangs from a different region of Haiti, who was a politician running for power and joined his political campaign, also to fight barbecue. Like, so it's all quite complex and messy. And I think it has to do with like, I think your question is right on. How do you legitimately start to put this back together? You have a gained assistance issue. You also have just the stabilization issue. This is going to be controversial, but Jean-Marc and I were talking a little bit about MINUSTA and like, what's the role of a foreign peacekeeping force at this moment? MINUSTA was the UN force that was in Haiti basically the whole time that I was going there, that stood by and just kind of was a presence. And it became very the target of received for justified reasons the ire of the Haitians because of like many serious allegations of sexual violence and the spread of cholera, which was rooted back to the MINUSTA mission. But it gets into this question of what's the role of international actors? Do we need that as a bridge? And how do you make sure those actors don't have impunity when they're in the country? I don't know if I have the answers to that, but those are questions I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so the UN peacekeeping force came in after Aristide was seized from the palace by US soldiers and put in Africa. That's when the peacekeeping force came in, and Haiti wasn't at war with anybody. And MINUSTA was very hated, and they could have done some good. I had the terrible experience of translating for the 15-year-old who was raped by 4 Uruguayan soldiers and who videoed themselves doing it. But back to RJ's question, I think that, you know, I remember when Aristide said as the first coup was going down, "Zouti no menu." And he meant that the tool in our hands was the Constitution. And after the fall of Duvalier, Haitians wrote a very strong constitution. That's one of the tools. And all the parties have to be represented. Peasant organizations, all the rural areas have to be represented, all of the parties. Because without that, it's going to be, thank you for coming, it's going to be more of the same. And Haitians have a great love for education. Remember when Rolf Trouillot said at a Haitian Studies Association meeting, the first one he attended, because I pushed him into joining, that Haiti had the highest publication rate of books of any place in the hemisphere after the United States. Haitians love education. Love education. And that's why the work that you've been doing, TJ, at ACE and all is so important. And they love their history, right? And they're very proud of their history. And the whole of the country has to be involved, right? Every sector has to be represented in any solution. And people can understand their situation, regardless of whether they went to school or not. Paul Farmer, the late Paul Farmer, also passed along with Trio, was very impressed with the historical consciousness of ordinary Haitians who had never gotten the chance to, as you say in Creole, sit on a school bench. But they understand, right, their history. And so even people who haven't had the chance to go to school need to be represented. Their voices and their understanding of their history and how to solve their own problems have to be part of this. So the Zouti, right, the tool of a very good constitution, and also the agency and the understanding and the energy of ordinary people, as well as those who have more education.
Yeah. good question.
I'm here in part because I work for the Holy Cross Mission Center, and Holy Cross has schools in Haiti. Though I think only through TJ have I had some sort of contact with them. Haiti is not a province that we have sort of formal networks and support for. But I would be interested to know if you have any recommendations for how NGOs and nonprofits might be able to offer support from afar.
Haiti has an unfortunate nickname of La République des NGO, right? And one of the intentional, very strategic policies of the US was to divert aid from the Haitian state so as to weaken the Haitian state and put it in the hands of NGO. So this derisive term of Haiti becoming a republic of NGOs brings attention to the utter chaos, right, of NGOs who have more money than the Haitian state and who have no accountability. So the help that NGOs give to Haiti has to be rethought, and the Haitian state has to be stabilized, and so that there can be the Haitian state representing the people in a democracy, leading the way and getting us support and assistance from NGOs. I think you must be proud of the fact that the Haiti program always insisted on working in partnership with the Ministry of Health. You weren't just going to go do your own thing, which a lot of NGOs think they have the right to do.
Yeah, same thing goes with Humanitarian, and we have projects that we are doing in Haiti. Like we are implementing a project like on water, and we insist on locally led project, right? So the money will go to the club in Haiti, and they implement the project with the government, with DNEPA as the umbrella, right? So that's the only way you can get sustainable development. Instead of someone, because an example, a vivid example, for malaria pill distribution, each institution, each NGO comes and then they distribute pills to one single community. What happened next? They develop resistance, So there's no concerted effort on the part of the NGOs to work with the government to deliver the pills.
This is what's meant by neoliberalism, right? Neoliberalism is meant to weaken the state, right? But the chaos we've been talking about in terms of quote games unquote is very much related to the weakening of the state, right? The state that doesn't have a budget even to pay for.
Well, how are the staff?
Right, and what?
I would add, though, I think it's worth differentiating between local NGOs or civil society organizations and international NGOs in this discourse, not to say that it isn't ultimately important, like that the state's role isn't vital in state capacity building, but like in situations of deep state fragility or crisis, often local civil society, in particular religious organizations like the church, like the Congregation of the Holy Cross, kind of step in, and their international ties and their international networks that you represent, and the possibility of philanthropy kind of keeping things afloat. It's not an ultimate solution, but it can be really helpful in times of crisis to continue to allow services and things to happen, like schools to function and things like that. So,
but the policies that the NGOs put forward have to be responding to locally stated demands. The local, the population has to tell you what they need. You can't decide what they need.
right.
You want one last question, two last questions, and then we'll.
Karen mentioned the invisible hand at work in Haiti's political and economic past and leadership. Seems this continues because Haiti's not been invited to the table in Jamaica, where it seemed, supposedly the next leader is being determined, which of course will be another puppet leader if Haiti's not at the table. John Mark mentions Haiti needs its chance to prove itself. You also mentioned the Friends of Haiti. Yet those who pose as Haiti's friends are a considerable part of the problem. They are well represented in Jamaica right now. So my question is, who are Haiti's genuine friends? And genuine is the key there. I mean, who are those who need to step up at this time to address that very powerful invisible hand and ultimately aid Haiti in its return to democracy?
Your question and we'll answer to both.
I'd be interested in hearing more about what's going on outside of Port-au-Prince. Why haven't the oligarchs and the armed groups taken over there? Is there some kind of lesson we can learn from them?
Thank you. All right. Why haven't the oligarchs taken?
Mhm.
Who wants to take?
Well, let me just, this is easy answer. Let me just give that
Yes.
easy answer. Because they control the gangs. That's why you never heard, I'll tell you that right this month. You've never heard oligarch get killed. Never. They never get kidnapped. Never. They never, I mean, I've been to one of the guys, one of the Brent's house. It's not far from the center town. I mean, it's accessible. No one can get there, or they don't get there. Okay, so this is to say that the gang's activity is controlled by some invisible hand, which us as normal citizen don't know, but government officials, they know it.
Can I add to this a little bit? It's the peak of the gang activity right now is in Port-au-Prince, but the gangs aren't limited to Port-au-Prince. It seems like they surround port towns, like there's a lot of gang activity in Gonaïves, I think, and maybe some other areas, but Port-au-Prince is, by far the biggest city, the biggest port. It's got a concentration of this activity, but it's not totally limited there either.
And we could go back to, a lesson in Haitian history that I think I gave in class the other day. The revolution was not an easy process because of the class divides among the people who envisioned the revolution and the leaders. Some of the most important leaders, including Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines and Henri Christophe, wanted to maintain a plantation system with people who would be free, sort of in name only, where they'd even have to work at the plantations for low wages where they had been slaves. And ironically, it was Alexandre Pétion, who was a mulatto, right, who had ties to France, who realized that the goal of the people who, withstood, who persevered over 13 years in this bloody war, just wanted to be masters of their own destiny. They just wanted to own their own little piece of land and farm their own land and decide what to plant and when to plant it. And for the women to be market women, marketing the food in a vibrant internal marketing system. As a result, the country peasantized, or some people say it followed a counter plantation model. Haiti was a country of small farms, decentralized. And that's part of the reason why the so-called gangs don't control all of the country. Because most of the country is functioning. They're certainly affected by the crisis in Port-au-Prince. And a big goal of the occupation was to centralize things and cripple the ports. But most of the countryside is still able to function. And there's no role for gangs in the countryside. They can't achieve, the people who run them don't really have a mission in the countryside, and the gangs aren't going to be successful there.
There's nothing there. Everything is concentrated in Port-au-Prince. Why go to this? I mean, they've been to the Artibonite region because it's a central metropolitan area of
Right.
Port-au-Prince and the Artibonite region.
Right.
That's where they are mostly located. Why Artibonite? Because there's a lot of most of the rice plantation
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah.
And there's also land dispute that is always fueled by people who had money, who had guns.
Right.
They want to have the more land, you know.
But there are some,
much
there
as
are,
possible.
there are many small cities that the gangs don't control. And it's partly because, there isn't the need, right? There isn't the desperation. So we want to think about the the majority of Haiti that is still functioning and people are carrying on their daily lives. And it isn't the crisis that is overrepresented in the media in Port-au-Prince.
Any thoughts on?
Do you want to answer that one?
Well,
Who are the Friends of Haiti?
I mean, we are forced to deal with a particular country or countries. We're not free to choose who to deal with. Just recently, the former senator, Jacques Sauverjean, he said that when we say international community, this is a misleading term. And it's true. International community should mean people from the South, countries from the South, countries from the North, the West, and the East get together. But because of geopolitical, reasons, we've been limited to just the US. And now since the US has control over the Caribbean countries, and then they say, okay, now you can deal with the Caribbean countries. Okay, but what's Cuba? You will never see Cuba because it's not part of it, right? And then when you go to Africa, they only identify or pinpoint Kenya because Kenya maybe has their own, dealings with the US. So, I mean, I'm very US proponent, but at the same time, we as Haitian, we are not free to choose who do we want to deal with. The last thing that killed Jovenel, that's what, the word was, because he went to Turkey or wherever it was to get electric contract done. He got back and then he got assassinated,
So what Jean-Marc is saying is the last president who was really put in place as a puppet. And the oligarchs thought they could control him. Just like what we've seen with the barbecue and the so-called gangs now, he started to flex his muscle, which threatened the oligarchs' control of the electricity. And so he had to be eliminated in his own bedroom. Also to send a message to anybody who would succeed him. And someone who is suspected as having been involved in the assassination, who was not the named prime minister, was appointed interim prime minister. And of course,
where did you get the letter?
He was blocked from returning to Haiti, right? When Jimmy and the others took over the airport.
That's the reason the gangs are asking they're part of the cake. Because if it was for demonstration on the street, he would have come back and then continued to run business as usual. But it was because the gangs led by Jimmy Cherizier took away the airport, and no plane could land.
We should also mention the plan to bring in 1,000 Kenyan troops to protect him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably wrap this up. I mean, thank you so much, and thank
you.
you all for your interest and your engagement, and hopefully this will just be the first of many of these discussions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.